Where is God? How come we don't see him any? He never walks the earth, he never shows his face. Even though God clearly cares about whether or not we believe in him, he hardly ever shows himself. Why is that? Well, the Bible actually has a pretty clear answer to those who are willing to pay attention to the story. Let's go back to the book of Genesis. Back when the world was first created, everything was perfect. The humans walking around, none of them ever envied. They never stole or killed or lied or anything like that. And God actually walked around with the humans back then. He hung out with them pretty much like a father and son would, which makes sense. After all, he is the father of all the humans. He made them. So what changed? Well, there is this specific garden run by these two humans, Adam and Eve. They're pretty much supposed to be the very first farmers ever. And in the garden there's this very specific tree called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And God tells them, you should not eat of that tree, otherwise you will die. And then there's a character introduced in chapter 3. This character is referred to as the serpent in this part of the Bible. There is evidence to show that this serpent was actually sort of a bodyguard of God's throne room back in the day. And then for some reason he got rebellious, he got angry at God for some particular reason. The Bible doesn't really tell us, but all we know is he is in rebellion of God. And he goes to Eve, tells her that if she eats of the tree that she would become sort of like a god, that she would know of good and evil, that she would become really wise and all this stuff. Eve does end up eating of the tree, and she gives the fruit to Adam, and he eats of the tree. And something here changes. They start to kill, they start to steal stuff, they start to lie, they start to envy. They become vulnerable to sin somehow. As if there was some sort of knowledge embedded into that fruit that the humans clearly were not meant to have. It's a strange idea for sure, but because of this, the innocence of those two humans it's just gone. And the purity of their soul just goes away as well. I think that's very similar to how a child grows up. A child, it doesn't really know any better, it just sort of runs around, it cries and it whines and all that stuff. And it doesn't really have any sort of understanding of good and evil and punishment and all that stuff. But then of course when you get older you start to learn about this kind of stuff, and you learn about things like what is right, what is wrong, things, punishment, good and evil. You start to learn all that stuff as you get older and older. It's pretty much the same thing here. Adam and Eve eat of the fruit. That fruit has some sort of knowledge in it that they clearly are not meant to have, and so their innocence and their purity is gone. It's just gone. And the more we sin, the less pure and the less innocent we become. And it got to the point where here's the important part. Here's the point. It got to the point where if we were to feel God's presence full on right this second, we would die. We would die because his presence is so intense. And this is why preachers talk about, oh, if you don't ask Jesus for forgiveness or whatever, we'll get to Jesus later. If we don't ask Jesus for forgiveness or whatever, we won't be able to make it into heaven. And that's simply because, pure impurity and all that stuff, because we literally are not clean enough, we are not pure enough, we are not innocent enough. We literally cannot go up to heaven because of that. So let's talk about Jesus for a moment. Back before Jesus, humans would in order to cover up for their sins, they had the idea of sacrificing a baby lamb and shedding that innocent blood to cover up for their sins, for the things that they did wrong. And this is why Jesus is talked about as sort of like the last Passover lamb sometimes. And there's that image in the Bible where of Jesus as a lamb, as a slain lamb, because that's basically the idea here. God sent a piece of himself down to die on the cross, so that way all we would have to do is ask for forgiveness in Jesus' name, and we would be cleansed. We would get pure. Your soul is cleansed. He got nailed to a cross made from the wood of a dogwood tree and suffered incredible, horrible pain and shed his blood on the cross. So that way all we would have to do is ask for forgiveness in the name of Jesus Christ. We ask Jesus for forgiveness, and then you're pure, your soul is cleansed, and your heart is transformed. And because of that, when we die, we will finally be able to go up to heaven and live a nice, comfortable afterlife in the clouds. Have fun with that information. Stay vigilant.